started. So thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Welcome. I am Farah Kimji, your 2020 Toronto Crew President, and we are so happy to have so many of you join us online for our very first webinar. This is our first time experimenting with this format and webinar platform, and so we're hoping you've all been able to log in with ease today. I want to start by personally thanking all of our members for being patient as we move to hosting our events virtually. We've received so many kind notes, and we appreciate the support and understanding during this time. We're looking forward to connecting with all of our members online in the coming weeks and months. And actually, we've been so happy to see so many of you join us already for our weekly crew coffee, and look forward to connecting with more of you in the weeks to come. All of our committees have been working very hard to move their programs virtually to offer content that is relevant and of value to our members. To that end, we welcome you to join us next week on May 6th for a webinar on technology and innovation in real estate. The week following, we'll be hosting a joint event with all of the Canadian Crew chapter presidents as they share insights from their markets. And we will also begin hosting virtual happy hours and dine-arounds. So stay tuned for those events in upcoming communications. Right now, you can register through our e-blast, and soon we will also have all of our events up on our website. I would also like to take a moment to thank our 2020 sponsors as displayed in this presentation. I'm just going to scroll through here. So these are all of our sponsors, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So thank you. I would now like to just address a few housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded. However, all of you attending are on mute and without camera, so don't worry, none of that is recording right now. There is a chat function, as I mentioned, where you can say hi and see who else has joined us for today's presentation live. As I mentioned, because we're recording, we're just doing that so that we can share that with members who weren't able to join live. And also there's a handout section on the right where you can kind of download a handout that's been already uploaded for you guys from our presenters today. There's also a polling function, so stay engaged throughout because we will be administering a few polls. And lastly, there is also a Q&A tab, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So as you guys all know, the mission of Toronto Crew is that we are dedicated to helping women excel, influence, and lead throughout their real estate careers. And during this time, the board has thought of what that means given the current landscape. And we feel that offering programs that support the wellness of our members as they work from home are aligned with that mission. And so today, I'm very excited to introduce our webinar topic, How to Thrive During the Quarantine. Today, we are joined by Dr. McCulloch and Dr. Sandilands, naturopathic doctors, and the co-founders of Durham Natural Health Centre in Pickering. Natalie and Nicole are also dear friends of mine from undergrad, and they are no strangers to the commercial real estate industry, as their father, Tom McCulloch, is a leader in our industry, currently heading up Canada Post Real Estate Group. Before I pass it off to Nat and Nicole, I'll quickly share the format. So they will present for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. Questions can be shared throughout this presentation in that Q&A section. Your questions will be anonymous, so only the presenters will get a chance to see those questions. And once they wrap their formal presentation, we'll move into that Q&A. And so don't feel free to share those as we go along. And as well, you can pay near the latter end of our presentation. So I will now pass it over to Nat and Nicole. And just so you guys know, I'm staying on screen only because we've had an issue with cameras and coming in and out of the presentation. So I'll be here, but I'll be on mute. And yeah, so without further ado, Nat and Nicole.
Okay, great. Thank you, Farah. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Nicole Sandilands, and for those of you looking to the other person on the screen, that is my twin sister, Dr. Natalie McCulloch. So you may be looking back and forth, going, "I wonder if they're related." Yes, we are twins, and we're here today to talk to you a little bit about how to thrive during quarantine. And so I just want to tell you a little bit of background. Like Farah mentioned, we both graduated from McMaster University in kinesiology, much to our father going, sorry, what is that degree? What exactly are you about to study? Before we embarked on our graduate studies at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. We opened a clinic together in 2012. That is a multidisciplinary clinic that has quite a few naturopathic doctors, osteopaths, massage therapists, and nutritionists. And what's keeping us busy, especially these days, as we are moving to a virtual space with our practice, are our little people at home that I've been throwing us for a bit of a loop. So I have a almost 4-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, and Natalie has a almost 2-year-old. So that's been keeping us quite busy. So wanted to jump into a little bit of some of the stats that have come out of China. So there's been some really interesting data that has come out of Wuhan specifically. So I think some things that we can probably extrapolate here, but there's been about 54% of people that have reported the psychological impact of the outbreak to be moderate to severe. So this is a lot. This is more than 1 in 2 having a significant impact on their stress. 16.5% of people are reporting severe depressive symptoms. Almost a third of people moderate to severe anxiety, and moderate to severe stress levels are up. So this is having a significant toll on the population, no doubt, given everything that's going on. So as I mentioned, this is having a huge impact on people's mental health. So we want to talk about some things that we can control today. You know, we can't control what's going on outside and what's going on in the world right now, but there are some things that we can do in our day-to-day to help us to feel our best throughout this time. And we hope that you leave today with an appreciation of some of those tools that you can hopefully implement starting today. Oops, sorry. So what are some of the things, am I having a lag on the slide here? What are some of those things that we can control? And let's sort of start talking about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about diet. We're going to talk about stress and our adrenal function. We're going to talk about sleep, and then we're going to talk about routine and structure. So as Nicole mentioned, hopefully we're going to leave you guys with some tips and strategies and things that you can hopefully implement today to help yourself sort of thrive during this really unique time. So let's talk about diet. This is something we talk all the time in practice about, super passionate about making sure that people are eating well. So what should we really be eating? What is an important thing for us to be consuming? And I think there can be a lot of sort of overcomplication, particularly in the nutrition space, and a lot of noise. We get asked all the time, should I do intermittent fasting? Should I be eating paleo? Should I be doing the blood type diet? Should I go vegan? Should I do an elimination diet? Should I cut out gluten? And I think really when it comes down to our nutrition, those diets all have a place and I will prescribe them absolutely. But I think when it comes down to nutrition, it's really about just sort of keeping things simple. Keep it simple. Our number one rule when it comes to nutrition is absolutely this. So whether you're trying to lose weight, gain muscle mass, improve performance, prevent disease, treat disease, whatever your sort of health goals are, I think if we can keep it simple and keep it down to the basics, you're going to be in a good position nutrition-wise. So obviously that comes down to our whole foods. And you guys have all heard this before, but if your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, you probably don't want to eat it. Or if you can't hunt, pick, fish, or grow it, it's not a whole food. Whole foods don't have nutrition labels on them. So I don't pick up an apple and go, what is this? I know it's an apple. I know it's a sweet potato. These are all sort of whole foods. So we normally say sort of eat whole foods to get real results. So eat real foods to get real results. And I think that this is extremely important. Okay, so, so the important thing I think is try not to be fooled by good marketing. There's people who spend a lot of money trying to get people to buy their products. And so just because something says gluten-free or natural or a good source of this or that, that's often just good marketing. Really trying to pay attention to what's actually in your food is more important. I think as a society, we end up spending a lot of time looking at the nutritional label, which is what tells us the calories, the fats, the proteins, the sodium that is in foods. But I often really try to get my patients to start spending much more time looking at this list, this ingredient list, understanding what is going into your body. And I like to always make a differentiation between what a processed food is and a convenience food. Okay, so for me, the list on the right where we see the almonds, pumpkin, organic coconut nectar, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, like these are all things I could have in my pantry. And I could go and grab all those items and go and put together that food Or I live in a time when I can afford the convenience to just go purchase that from a store. Okay, so that for me, that's a convenience food, not a processed food. The one on the left where we're seeing all these different food dyes and colorings and all sorts of words we don't know, those are all, that would be a processed food. So we want to really start to pay attention to what are we putting in our body. I don't care so much about the amount of calories that somebody's putting in. I don't care. I want 100 calories to come from something good, right? I don't want it to come from something on the left, because that's really going to make a difference in terms of how our body feels, how our body responds. So really starting to focus more on the ingredient list than just solely focusing on that nutritional panel. So what does a good diet look like? You know, I think we've already mentioned this. It's whole foods. It's buying whole ingredients. So it's buying things as they exist in nature and cooking. I think right now more than ever, let's not overcomplicate things. I've been talking to a lot of my patients right now about having quick, easy options available. We are stressed. We're working from home. We're juggling a million things. It's not the time to be doing all the gourmet cooking. I think making realistic changes is what we want to be doing. So short-term changes, short-term changes that are realistic, that we can implement and hold on to. Trying to balance your meals is really important. So anytime you're eating, whether it's a snack, a breakfast, a lunch, really trying to have a good source of protein, a fat, and some sort of carbohydrate. And so I spend a lot of time talking about what carbs I want people to eat, and it's usually the fruits and vegetables. I don't want the bread, I don't want the pasta, I don't want as much of that. I want more of those fruits and vegetables. Planning ahead now more than ever. Most of us are grocery shopping now once a week. And so we need to know what we're buying for what we're making, right? So that we're not letting stuff go to waste, or we're not running out of all the good produce by, Tuesday, and we're not going back to the grocery store till Sunday, right? So really having a plan, but keep that plan really, really simple. We've put together in your slides just sort of 3 days worth of meal plans for you. So really simple, really easy things that you can implement at home. And I'll let you guys download the slides and take a look at that. But hopefully it just gives you a good framework of what food could look like for you. And then this is another resource that I wanted to provide to you. These are some different websites that have some great recipes available to you, as well as they have cookbooks, but a lot of the stuff is available online as well. Some of them are vegan. I don't think everybody needs to eat vegan. I do often, tell my patients, like, feel free to throw a chicken breast in that meal, but the framework for the meals I think is really well balanced and quite healthy and full of whole ingredients. So I just wanted to leave you guys with some resources there. So now let's jump gears and talk a little bit about stress. And I think stress is coming at us in so many different angles. It's sort of multifactorial, whether it's family pressures or work pressures or deadlines or worry about your careers. And we could layer pandemic onto this list. There's sort of stressors coming at us at sort of every angle. So I wanted to start with sort of our first poll. So I'm going to start this poll, and I wanted to get an assessment of how stressed people are feeling. So how stressed are you feeling right now on a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 being none at all and 5 being extremely stressed. So I'll give you guys just a minute, or not even, just to put your numbers in there. Okay. Okay, so if I look at some of these responses, oh, hang on, I'll give it 5 more seconds and I'll close this poll. Hopefully you guys have all found that okay. Okay, here we go. So I will close this. Oh, I will close that poll. Oh, did I give me the answers? Oh boy. Go to closed. Got it. Thanks. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so interesting. Not one single person put not stressed. So nobody answered a 1. 14% of people answered 2. 50% of people answered a 3, so definitely feeling it. 25% of people entered a 4, and 11% of people entered a 5. So most people are hanging out in sort of that mid-range to sort of higher end of that stress barometer. So certainly people are feeling it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means in your body and what is happening. We throw that word around so liberally in society of like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm busy, I'm this and that. But what does that actually mean for you? So our stress response is governed by our adrenal glands. And our adrenal glands are 2 little glands that sit on top of our kidneys. They get their name adrenal because they produce adrenaline. So that fight or flight hormone that we've all sort of felt, whether it's you've been sort of on the verge of a car accident, you get sort of that, or something's going to fall and you get that sort of that fight or flight reaction. Those adrenal glands will certainly produce that, but they will also produce cortisol. And cortisol is our long-term stress hormone. And when I say long-term, unfortunately, in today's modern world, we're not walking around with high stress for 3 weeks. We're walking around with high stress for 3 months, 3 years. So a lot of people are walking around with sort of this chronic stress that can certainly impact us. So I want to talk about sort of what are some of the signs and symptoms that we can look out for, because like any gland in our body or any organ system in our body, if we start to utilize it over and over again, eventually it will get tired and eventually it will start to not function as well as it should function. So, how do we know if our adrenal glands are tired? And I'll go through some of these signs and symptoms. In clinical practice, we'll test for it. So there's some salivary hormone tests that we'll do, or we'll do a urine test, and I can actually test somebody's cortisol to get a really great appreciation. Or if we don't want to do that, I oftentimes will go through some of these symptoms. So fatigue is a big one. So people will feel really tired. They'll have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. So this is oftentimes sort of my patients who are waking up between that sort of 3 and 5 a.m. And they wake up between 3 and 5 and they're like, I'm ready to start my day. I can't go back to sleep. It doesn't matter what I try. And the reason being is cortisol has a bit of a circadian rhythm in our body. So it should peak really high in the morning. So it should be high between 6 and 7 and then come down throughout the day and be low at night. And that's so melatonin can rise to get us to sleep. But if we're having a lot of stress and we're having cortisol dysregulation, it can peak between that sort of 3 and 5. And it's like that morning wake up hormone and you're ready to go, but it's not the right time. So most people will eventually fall asleep at 5 with enough time for their alarm to go off at 6. We can get a lot of foggy thinking. I see this in a lot of my patients. They will say they're having a hard time remembering things, or they see somebody and they can't remember their name, or they have to write everything down. There can be difficulty losing weight or noticing more abdominal weight gain. Mood changes, so anxiety, depression, low sex drive, irritability, mood swings, headaches, frequent colds, reproductive issues. So long-term elevations in cortisol can definitely affect our reproductive hormones. So for women, that can lead to changes in their period or difficulty getting pregnant. And I'm sure you've all experienced that, where you've been under a time of tons of stress and your periods have kind of been off, whether you've missed one or it came really early or you're not sure what's happening there. But it does have sort of an overarching implication in terms of our body. So now that I've told you sort of all the bad stuff, sort of what are the things that we can do for stress? So I want to leave you guys with some things that we can do and that you can implement into your lifestyle. So I think number one, especially for today, is sort of determining the cause. So what is causing the stress? And I feel like today, with sort of quarantine and everything that's going on, the stressors are a bit new for a lot of us. With me and Nicole having sort of young children at home, I've never tried to work from home with a toddler running around. This is completely new to me. So that certainly has been, sometimes a blessing, and then sometimes definitely a source of stress. But there's a bunch of things that I think we can do to sort of help ourselves. And one of the things is to try to make time for things that bring you joy. So things that help you de-stress. And we have this question on our intake form, and I always find it so interesting when I ask patients, like, what do you do for fun? And half of people will leave a blank. And I'm like, that's so sad. We should be having a lot more fun. So whatever that is that sort of brings you joy, I'm going to encourage you to bring more of that into your life. Breathing exercises, stretching, meditation, yoga, some kind of movement is huge for our stress response. I love a couple of the meditation apps that are out there. They're sort of free downloads, and I tell patients about them all the time. But there's one that's called the Calm app, and then there's one that's called Headspace. But they're sort of generally about 10-minute meditations that sort of walk you through sort of a guided meditation. So if you've never done it before, they're a really great way to just to help ease you into it. And I think meditation can just really help in terms of helping with our stress response. I oftentimes will encourage patients to support their body and replete some of the nutrients that we lose by stress. When we're under a lot of stress, our metabolism gets really revved up, and we're sort of in that sympathetic nervous system. So we burn through our magnesium, our B vitamins, vitamin C. These are all some really important nutrients. Oftentimes I'll do it orally, or when life is normal and we're in practice, one of the things that we do is IV therapy. So I'll do IVs with some vitamin C. Or we'll use some different herbs, and I listed a few there. And then getting adequate sleep is so important. One of the things that I've been talking a little bit, just to add to what Natalie said, to my patients right now, because a lot of these stressors are new and a lot of life has changed. I keep talking about this with my patients about this is like the big pause, right? So we have an opportunity to kind of reflect on what stressors, what things in life am I not missing? And what are the things that I'm really missing? So that when life eventually returns to normal, maybe the hustle and bustle is something we, maybe want to scale down the pace of our life, or maybe there's some things that just weren't serving us that we've had an opportunity to really step back from and evaluate. So just something to kind of keep in mind when it comes to the stressors you can control. So I want to do another poll. So I'm going to start this poll. I want to know how much sleep everybody is getting. So I'll start the poll now. Great. Okay. So the answers come in. And so what I'm seeing is that most 46% are sitting in that 5 to 7 hours of sleep. 10%, 12% are getting, 12. So a little about 45% are getting 7 or more hours of sleep. So we're kind of split between those two. And what I'm finding with my patients right now is that our sleep patterns have changed immensely through all of this. A lot of people are not commuting. They have a little extra time in the morning. They're staying up a little bit later. But when it comes to sleep, and when it comes to managing our stress in response to sleep, we really need ideally a full 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And so there's a big difference here between just the quantity and the quality as well. So this is something that I'll talk to patients about, but trying to aim for that 7 to 8 hours. 1 hour less of sleep per night will stimulate cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone. When we get elevations in cortisol, we start to inhibit leptin. This makes us feel hungry. Okay, so we start to feel hungrier. We make less serotonin. That's our happy, feel-good brain chemical. So we start to feel down, anxious. We make less growth hormone. So we don't repair as quickly. So our muscle mass can get affected. And we make more ghrelin, which is the hormone that makes us feel hungry. So we have this perfect storm of triggering appetite and feeling hungry. And so what I often talk to my patients about when we are under stress is it's really important to prioritize our sleep, because what's going to happen is we're going to end up gaining weight. We're going to end up having some different changes in terms of our metabolism that are not, it's not a lack of motivation thing. It's not, I can't stick to this diet thing. It's the biochemistry that's happening that's making this, sort of setting us up for failure, right? So sleep is so important. It can also affect our insulin response, which can cause more fat stores. So I did a study and they looked at people who were getting 5 hours of sleep versus those that were getting 8 hours of sleep. And the amounts were pretty pronounced in terms of this leptin and ghrelin hormone. And so again, the ghrelin was elevated, so we were hungry, and the leptin was suppressed. So we weren't feeling as full. Okay, so we're hungry and our appetite has gone up. And the body mass index, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a ratio of weight over height. So essentially these people were heavier. So, regardless of dietary changes whatsoever, we just see this pattern happening. And so I've been joking with my patients about the quarantine 15. A lot of patients are talking about how they've been gaining weight and how, I think we all thought this was going to be short term. And now here we are into week 7 or 8, I can't even remember. And so, we're sort of struggling a little bit with this. And I say, let's try to prioritize where we can. And sleep is such a huge factor here. So what can we do? So, creating this routine, and Natalie's going to talk a little bit about this in a moment, but really getting, going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. You've heard this before, but now more than ever, really trying to create some consistency within those patterns, trying to get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. If you can shift it, like if you're staying up a bit later because you can sleep in a bit, that's fine. But just try to get that 7 to 8 hours a night. Try to limit your screen time. So phone, computer, TV, before bed. Melatonin is the hormone that puts us to sleep and keeps us asleep. And it gets secreted in response to darkness. So if we are staring at a screen right up until bedtime, we're preventing our melatonin from being secreted adequately. And so what ends up happening is it can disrupt the quality of our sleep or make it harder for us to get to sleep. So I usually like a 1 hour buffer between screen time and bedtime, if we can swing that. And also make sure that your room is as dark as possible. Again, we produce that melatonin in response to darkness. If I have a bright street light right outside of my window and I don't have adequate blinds to block that out, I'm not going to make as much. So a really simple fix is an eye mask. So often tell my patients, just buy an eye mask, throw that on, you'll make your room dark, and then you'll secrete better, more melatonin, and often leads to better quality sleep. Blue light blocking glasses are something that I'll mention to patients. And especially now, we're all staring at screens all day long. All those in-person meetings have now been switched to, online meetings. So when you would have gotten a break from a screen, now you're not getting it. And blue light that gets emitted from these devices impedes our melatonin production. Try to do some sort of a calming activity or ritual before bed. We're so good with kids. It's bath, book, bed, like they just have it programmed. It's like, oh, bath's starting. Okay, start to unwind, start to go to get ready for sleep. We don't do that as adults. We're doing an email right before we try to go to bed, or we're, on social media on our phones. Like we need to kind of have some sort of routine, whether it's reading or having a bath or having a quiet cup of tea, anything to help to wind our body down. I see a lot of this I have a lot of patients who I describe as tired but wired. They're exhausted, and then they can finally get to bed, and it's like their mind is going a mile, and they're like, I'm so tired, I just want to sleep, but I can't. And so we talk a lot about, trying to implement these routines. Managing your cortisol, so managing that stress response, because that cortisol and melatonin have an opposite relationship. So if your cortisol is high, your melatonin is going to be low. So it's going to make it harder to get to sleep and stay asleep. And then there's a lot of supporting things that we'll do beyond these, magnesium, melatonin, valerian, passion flower. There's lavender is one of my favorites. I mean, there's lots we can do in addition if we need it. But I always say, so you got to start with the basics. We got to get those pieces in place to really make a difference. So let's talk now about sort of creating routine. And most of us, as Nicole mentioned, I think we all, when this began, we all thought this was going to last 2 weeks. It was going to be the week after, the 2 weeks after March break. Everybody's sort of on vacation mode. No big deal. We're going to sort of jump back. And now I'm sort of talking to patients on these virtual consults, and they're like, this isn't going away, and I have no structure and no routine. And I think that is so key to sort of helping with our stress response and just giving us a little bit of a sense of control, maybe, of sort of what's going on. And this is a piece that we can certainly have some power over. So what does a good routine look like? And this is obviously going to be different for everyone, whether you are a working mom with kids at home or working with no kids or not working. Are you going to the office? Are you staying at home? And I think the age of your kids will determine this as well, what this might look like. Most parents have been given now the added responsibility of not only having your kids at home full time, but if your kids are school age, now you are homeschooling. So, I've been talking to patients about this, and this is sort of like an added pressure, obviously, of keeping your kids in their curriculum, keeping them engaged in their school, but then you have the same amount of work to keep up with. So this can be quite challenging. So I want to talk about sort of how can you create structure? How can we create this? What can we do in our everyday? And I think number one is to have some flexibility around it. It's not going to be perfect every day. There will be some variables that get in the way. There will be some things that just sort of derail you off your plan. But if we can have some loose structure around sort of what your day will look like, I think it will be helpful. We need to be realistic. You're probably, if you do have children at home and you're the working mom, you're probably not going to get done as much as you wanted to, or as much as you did when you were at the office. So being realistic about that, letting go of some expectations, be gentle with yourself as you would if you were talking to a friend. We're so good to sort of beat ourselves up and go, oh my gosh, I got nothing done today. And, let's just sort of have some compassion and some empathy for ourselves surrounding this. And then I think a really good day starts with a good morning routine. So let's chat about what are some things that you can add into your morning to really help yourself out. So we talked a little bit about the benefits of exercise, and I think it's so important, but if your day gets away from you, so does exercise. So I think it's really important to sort of get it in early so you actually do it, especially if you have young children. It might be beneficial to sort of set your alarm, get up before them, get this piece in so you can have both sort of a calm sort of start to your day to set the tone for the rest of your day. I love the idea of sort of like mindful minutes in the morning, and whatever that looks like for you, whether that's meditation, whether that's prayer, whether that's journaling, whether that's just writing down like 3 things to be grateful for. That's one of my favorite exercises to give to patients, because I think when we are in the negative, that's all we sort of see and attract. And if we can really sort of shift our perspective and start to look for the beauty that's around us, we can really help to lift up our mental health. Writing out your goals and expectations for the day is helpful just to sort of keep you on track. And then making sure you're starting your nutrition really well. So starting with a healthy and nutritious breakfast. So you guys can go back to those sample days and get sort of 3 different breakfasts that I think would be a really great start to a healthy day. And so here are some takeaways that we hope that you can implement now, and things that you can start doing in your day-to-day in your homes that can hopefully help to make a difference in terms of how you're feeling, how you're thriving during this time. So I think we've sort of belabored this point, but focus on good, clean, whole foods as much as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to do this as often as possible. Try to focus on increasing your water intake. Now is the perfect opportunity to outline how much water you should be drinking in a day. So I always say it's actually half your body weight in fluid ounces. So we always hear that like 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. It's actually a little bit more individualized than that. Somebody who's 120 pounds versus somebody who's 190 pounds, like their needs are going to be different. And so if you're 150 pounds, you divide that in half, it's 75 fluid ounces. That's about 9 glasses of water. And so, seeing where you sort of fit on that. And this is a great thing. I always tell patients, get your goal and put that on your counter, on your desk where you're working, and just dispense from that all day. And then you'll know at the end of the day, like, oh, geez, I only had half of that. Or, yeah, no, I did pretty well. I had most of it. So it just kind of keeps you accountable. Manage your stress and your cortisol. So like Natalie said, breathing, meditation, exercise, proper sleep, the morning routine with the breathing, the meditation. There you go. Good one, Farah. It doesn't have to be long, right? Like I've been really talking to my patients about like your exercise can be a 20-minute walk. Like give up the idea of this hour and a half long workout. Like it's just, I'd rather you be active for 20 minutes most days and try to cram in an hour and a half twice a week. You're going to be better served by doing something daily. Same with your breathing. Like it could be 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be a lot. Try to get that sleep, that 7.5 hours. And then schedule that exercise like you can and try to create that routine for your current situation.
And there's so many wonderful online platforms that are doing free workouts. So if you're used to going to the gym or you're used to going to a yoga studio, this is totally new for you to try and do these sort of at-home workouts. With the weather changing, I've been encouraging people to go for a run if it's safe to do so and get outside, because I think that that's also really great, getting the vitamin D and really great for our mental health. But there are so many online platforms that are really great. And I feel like everybody in the online world is sort of doling out their free workouts. So now's an opportunity to maybe sort of jump on and create that structure and that routine.
And that's sort of what we want to talk to you about today. We have some information I want to leave you with. We're pretty active on Instagram, so you can go follow us there if you want more tips and recipes and some fun along the way. You've got our contact info. And mine and Natalie's practices tend to be predominantly women's health. So we deal a lot with hormones, and we've put together a free healthy hormone guide, which is something you can just go to godnhc.ca if you're interested, and you can just download that, and it'll give you some lifestyle things that you can do to help balance your hormones if you're interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. I know I learned a lot of great tips from that. Let's move into our Q&A. We did have some questions rolling in.
Great.
So the first question we have is, if you're interested in getting tested for high cortisol, is this something you can ask your GP to request through blood work?
It can be done through blood work.
Yeah, I can speak to it. It's fine. It can be done through blood work. It is a serum test, so it can easily be done through blood work. But cortisol has a circadian rhythm. So it's high in the morning and then it comes down throughout the day. So I often find times just doing one little snapshot first thing in the morning, not enough. It doesn't give us a full picture of what's happening during the day. It sometimes can be a helpful starting point, but when I do salivary testing or urine testing, we do it at 4 points during the day so we can get an idea of what that curve actually looks like. Because sometimes people's morning cortisol will be normal, or they'll have 1 point during the day where it's normal, and we've missed what that actual curve will look like. The other thing that I don't like about salivary or serum or blood cortisol testing is that for some people, going to a lab is stressful. So they're already ramping up all their cortisol to sort of get there. So I like to, I normally tell people, do this in the comfort of your home. You can, urinate in this cup, or you can spit in this little cup, and it's kind of easy, but it doesn't give us sort of that full picture. But technically, yes, it can be done.
Okay, great. Then we had a couple of questions around sleep. So one of the questions was, does the time of night you go to sleep matter? So, going to bed at 9 p.m. versus 1 a.m. Does that
Yeah.
Does that matter?
Yeah, it does. Typically,
if you're still getting, 8 hours.
Yeah, so you want to get your 8 hours, but typically it is best to try to follow some sort of rhythm with the sun, right? So we don't want to be sleeping until 10, 11 when the sun's rising at about 6. In a perfect world, if we're dealing with cortisol or stress, our body loves like 10 p.m. bedtime and a 6 a.m. wake up. That gives us 8 hours, and it really follows the patterns of the sun and the rhythms of the day a lot better. And so I do try to encourage an earlier bedtime, although I am being a little bit more flexible with my patients right now. And I'm like, well, if you're getting to bed at 11 and you're waking up at 7 because you don't have to get up quite so early, like I'm okay with that too.
And then to that, some have asked, what about too much sleep, like getting over 10 hours?
One of the things that I often, sometimes I'm okay with that if they just need to recharge, but then I also ask the question, is this a symptom of something else? Because sometimes when we're depressed or our moods are low, the tendency is to want to sleep. If our anxiety is high, sometimes I like to tease out, well, why are we sleeping so much? Is it because we're tired, or is it a symptom of something different? And if we are tired, is this just normal, sort of expected fatigue, or is this a deficiency that we should be investigating? So I sometimes like to understand the reason why we might be sleeping a little bit more.
Okay. Then we also had a question, again, with sleep regarding, if we recommended to read before bed, what if you're reading on a Kindle or an iPad?
Yeah, so those blue light blocking glasses are great for that. I think, on the Kindle, you can sort of dim the light the best you can. So try and keep that as dim as possible. And then sometimes it's even what you're reading. So I tell patients, if you're having trouble sleeping, don't read something that's super stimulating and, anxiety producing or provoking. So yeah, if sleep is a real issue, I'll tell people to go to a book. If people are just having it sort of depends on sort of the degree of the sleep issues.
There's also night settings on a lot of these things
right.
that you can put on your iPad and you can put on your iPhones that when they do that, it mutes some of the blue light. Okay. So it's designed to help with that. So that's a good shift that you can
or just use the blue light blocking glasses can be helpful. Sure. I'm not sure about a Kindle if it actually emits that, but I'm not sure. I don't think it does, but I'm not sure.
Now what about with regards to diet and food? Organic versus not organic. What are your thoughts on that?
So we know that sort of conventionally grown produce, we have sort of two things there. We have herbicides and pesticides that have been sprayed sort of all over it. And we also have the genetically modified seeds that have been sort of that are part of that produce. I'm not... It's always a stepwise for me. If I have somebody coming into my office and they're eating so horribly and processed foods, I just start with just eat some vegetables. I don't care. Just start getting some vegetables in. If somebody's coming in and they have a really pristine diet and it's really clean, then I'll push them to go organic and let's decrease the pesticides and residues that you're taking into your body. There's a really great app that I love and a list that gets put out every year by the Environmental Working Group. It's their Clean 15 and their Dirty Dozen, they call it. So the Dirty Dozen is the list of 12 foods that are the most heavily sprayed in terms of herbicides and pesticides. You can download the app or you can just go to Environmental Working Group Dirty Dozen and you'll see it. But I always encourage patients, if we can't do all organic, let's at least do the Dirty Dozen organic, because those are the ones that have the most amount of pesticides and residues. If it's in the budget and we can access it and do all organic, I do think that definitely has some benefit. They've done some studies to look at people's pesticide residue in their blood, herbicides and pesticides in their blood. And they actually, when people just moved to the Dirty Dozen list and just started eating those organic, it actually dropped. So we do see benefit from it.
They've also come out with some studies where they compare the nutrient content between the two, and there doesn't seem to be a huge difference there. So it's not about necessarily getting more it's not about what you're getting more of, it's what you're getting less of.
Got it.
That's true.
Okay. I know we could probably do a whole topic on this, but with some tips on maybe immunity during this time and trying to prevent getting sick, and because clearly something's going around right now. Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I think what I've been telling my patients is, the goal is to keep you well, right? And so your immune system becomes a piece of that puzzle, but I think the big thing is keeping people well. And so I think, a lot of stuff we talked about, managing stress, eating well, prioritizing your sleep, it plays a huge role on all the systems in the body, including your immune system. So I think that's probably the most important thing that we could be doing right now.
Okay, awesome. We had another question come in. What would be one book that you would recommend for general education about a naturopathic lifestyle?
Oh, gosh.
One, I bet.
Oh. Huh. Maybe we should write one, Nat.
Yeah, right?
Oh gosh, there's so many, but they seem to be, a lot of them are fairly like topic specific. I don't know if I know a good like overarching one.
Can we get back to
Yeah,
you
you'll
on
have to
that?
leave me with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Any other questions rolling in? Everyone's being a little bit shy. So I know this has been great. I'd love to hear everyone's feedback on today's session. I really appreciate your guys' time and comments. Oh, you know what? I had a quick question. A lot of women are working from home. Obviously, a lot of our members are working from home. As you mentioned, balancing all these things. Are there any specific, and you've mentioned it throughout, but are there any things that even you guys are just sort of doing differently as you've moved from your practice to home that are really intentional to try to be able to incorporate some of these things? So like even just like, have you set alarms to get up every 10 minutes so you're not, not every 10 minutes, so that you're not sitting, in front of your computer all day long? I personally know that sometimes I've gone hours of just sitting at my desk and not having had water and not walked. And like, what can we maybe do to make it a little bit more intentional?
Yeah, a couple of things that I've been trying to do is just really prioritizing working out. So for me, I used to always go to the gym and get out, and that's obviously been a big shift. So for the first few weeks, I was doing nothing and trying to sort of implement that now. I've been really intentional about my sleep. Partly because I have a toddler who thinks that 5 o'clock is an appropriate wake up time. So I have been being really diligent about my sleep and getting to bed early because I know that helps me sort of overall. Setting alarms is helpful. I know like the Fitbits and the Apple Watches have some great alarms in terms of like breathing. So like doing some like breathing exercises. If you do notice that your body gets stiff, like getting up is definitely beneficial and helpful. And then I think creating like the structure in terms of your day. Like now there's no on and off time for people's work. So I think being really intentional about putting in sort of the same amount of hours and time blocking, I think can be really helpful. And for some people that might be different. Like I know certainly in my household, like I'm working into the evening more than I ever have just because there's not a lot of time during the day with the little one running around. So, but just sort of being intentional about sort of the hours that you're putting in, I think can be helpful.
And I've been sort of telling my patients, like, pick one thing. Like let's not put all this pressure on ourselves. Let's pick one thing a day that we can do. So whether it's water one day, maybe it's movement the next day, just trying to be really intentional with, one sort of healthy thing and not putting all this pressure on ourselves to do everything. I think there's a lot of pressure on, how productive can we be in quarantine and how, clean can our house be? And sometimes we're just trying to survive through the day. Just trying to get to the end of the day and, hopefully accomplish a couple of things, So I think just being forgiving with ourselves and, just don't put so many pressures.
Sure. And actually, we just had another question come in. So further to the immunity topic, she said, I wanted a video by, or I guess she listened to a video by some fancy doctor recently, and he noted that having everyone isolated is actually bringing down our natural immunity to fight viruses. So after people come out of lockdown, it will be much harder to fight things like this. Any thoughts?
Oh, it's a big topic. It's a big topic. That's sort of intentional. Like I think that that we're going to be more vulnerable to it, but it's to slow it, right? And so by staying home, we're not getting it. So we're not getting immunity to it right now. But the idea is, as I think things reopen, that we will build some of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess the point there is sort of like we're not getting to herd immunity, I guess is what they're trying to say. And herd immunity is when a lot of the population sort of has had it, and we've built an immunity sort of as a society.
The population.
As population.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think too, like I'm not a doctor, but as adults, a few months at home isn't gonna all of a sudden
No.
wipe
and
out
this
your
is
immunity,
one virus, right?
At least that's what.
And we've got exposure as our lifetimes to other viruses, right? So that doesn't go away. That doesn't just disappear because we're staying home.
Sure. I wanted to just jump in. A tip I heard that was really great was scheduling in your lunch. Like if you have a shared calendar where anyone can just jump into your calendar from your workplace and schedule time with you, like blocking off your lunch or blocking off, chunks throughout the day where no one can schedule time with you. I think that's especially if your calendar is shared.
I've been talking a lot to patients about that. The boundaries are so blurred right now. We're just constantly attached to work, and so too attached, right? More than ever, right? Email following your phone home used to be the one thing, and now it's, you can be face to face with somebody at any time of day. And so being really intentional about how much time you're going to devote to work, what's realistic, what allows you to still do those other things that bring you joy and let you thrive and let you do all those things.
Yeah, and on that note, I'd like to, while we cap off here, I think that joy piece is really, something to think about, because as much as, like you guys said, there's a lot that's not in our control right now, we can control the things that bring us joy and focus on them. Some of us may have a little extra time on our hands, some may not, but building in that joy, and I think is really, really important during this time. I know it's helped me a lot because I'm one of those people who does have a little bit more free time. So I've used that intentionally. And I think even if it's just 5 minutes, it can make a huge difference. We actually did have one other great question to cap off on, which is any suggestions as to sparking motivation?
I would say
accountability. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say accountability groups are great. So like teaming up with friends. So whether like whatever you're trying to be motivated towards, whether it's, cooking or eating clean or exercise, like team up with some friends, whether that's via just like a text message group, or I think an accountability group is always really beneficial. Align yourself with people who will motivate you. So not that friend that's like, oh, well, we didn't work out today, don't worry about it. Align yourself with that person that's going to really be like, no, we said we were going to do this. Let's sort of get on that. But I think using your peers, and this is sort of a dual bonus at this time because it allows you to sort of connect with people, which I think is beneficial.
And I would say pick something, whatever that thing that you're trying to get motivation for, whether it's cooking more or whether it's exercise, pick the one thing that's giving you the least resistance. You might have a list of 5 or 6 things that you want to try to accomplish, but I would say pick the one thing that you think, okay, this one is giving me the least resistance. I'm going to start with this one. Like, let's set ourselves up for success during this time, right? Let's not set ourselves up for unrealistic expectations and putting too much on us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know when this all started, I thought, okay, we're going to be at home for a month. Like, now's the time for me to do it all. And I had really grand expectations for quarantine, for losing weight and learning languages and marathons. I've never run like 5K, all these grand things. Instead, I realized, I narrowed it to 6. I posted the 6 really where I can see it. Most days I'm doing 3, but before I was doing 0 of the 6. And I'm working my way up to kind of getting to 6 of the 6,
Great.
every day. And that personally has really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't see any other questions coming in, but we did receive a really great comment that this is the best webinar that one of our participants has sat through in a long time.
That's very kind.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know that's the sentiment of all of us here on the call today. So again, thank you very much, Nat and Nicole, for giving time to us. I know you guys are all very busy as well with your practice and your kids at home. So we really appreciate this. And maybe everyone can kind of sign off in the chat function and say their goodbyes there. And hopefully we'll get to see you all for some of the upcoming events that I mentioned at the top of the call. And as we communicate those to you through our e-blast and on our website. So thank you again for joining us. And we'll chat again soon. And don't forget to download the handout as well if you haven't already. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.